Welcome everyone. I'm Suzanne Borden. I am Moment Magazine's Special Project Manager, and I'd like to welcome you to Moment Happy Hour for today's Zoominar. Funny you should ask, how and why Jews became the people of the joke with Bob Mankoff. We're so happy to have so many of you join us today. Please note that today's Zoominar is being recorded and we will post it later this week for others to view. At the end of Bob's talk, we will open it up for Q&A. So just type your questions into the chat box, which you can find at the bottom of your screen. But before we begin, we want to invite everyone to participate in our cartoon caption contest, which was founded by Bob many years ago. For each issue of Moment, you will find a cartoon on our website for which you can submit your own captions. If creating captions is not your thing, you can simply vote on your favorite caption from the previous issue. In addition, you can read interviews with some of our cartoon contributors. So after the Zoominar, please go to momentmag.com/cartoon and give us your captions on the cartoon you're currently seeing on the screen. In addition, while you're on our website, you can purchase Have I Got a Cartoon for You, the Moment Magazine book of Jewish cartoons, which we published with Bob through Moment Imprint. And if you purchase the book from our website within the next 24 hours, we'll send those books to Bob for him to sign before we ship them to you. And finally, please join us next Tuesday, May 5th, for our next Zoominar with Moment Senior Editor Dina Gold, who will share her personal story, Stolen Legacy, Nazi Theft and the Quest for Justice. Be sure to visit momentmag.com for more program updates, register for upcoming Zoominars, and to access Moment's Guide to the Global Pandemic. Now on to today's show. Funny you should ask, how and why Jews became the people of the joke. For over 40 years.
Get over here. Stop watering those plants. Come on. I'm here. The plants look fine. Come water me.
Hi. I'm almost done. For over 40 years, Bob Mankoff has been the driving force of comedy and satire at some of the most honored publications in America, including The New Yorker and Esquire. He has devoted his life to discovering just what makes us laugh and seeks every outlet to do so. He's currently the cartoon editor at the weekly online newsletter Airmail. Bob is also a true friend of Moment. And with that, please welcome Bob Mankoff.
Hi, everybody. It's great to be here. And if you want a really good caption, a winning caption, you can text me, and for a very reasonable fee, I will give you that caption. Okay, people of the joke. That's us, right? You can tell because I have sort of Hebraic letters there. Now, when we see, let's see if this works. Yes. Here's a Google search. What percentage of comedians are depressed? I know a lot, or cartoonists. You know why they're depressed? It's hard to be funny for money. Try it. If you're just funny, that's it. But look at the next one. What percentage of comedians are Jewish? Like, you don't have up there what percentage of comedians are Ukrainian. Jewish. All right? I hear your muted laughter, and I'm delighted by it. Please email me all your repressed laughter afterwards. Hi, you could give a smile. I'm watching. This is great. It's great because I can surveil. Usually if there's a regular audience, you can't look at everybody. Here I can check the smilers from the non-smilers. So here's a list of old-time Jewish comedians. Now, of course, we can't laugh at anybody anymore. Oh, poor Woody. And then, of course, there's Al Franken. Actually, I still do laugh at him. I read the Woody Allen book. There are parts of it that are very good. Of course, if you believe some preposterous story, you're not going to think it's funny. But anyway, that said, let me move on to, here's this history of Jewish comedy, and I am in this lineage of Jewish comedy, unbeknownst to me for many years, but now looking back on it, I realized that I got a fairly nice house here, and a swimming pool that just opened up because I'm funny, and part of that is because I'm Jewish. Now, it's such a commonplace that Jews are funny that once you know something gets on Seinfeld, then you know.
I'll tell you what's up.
Excuse me?
I'm a Jew. I finished converting 2 days ago.
Oh, well. Welcome aboard. Hey, were you just at the health club?
Oh, yeah.
No, we must have just missed you.
Ah, well, I didn't do much. I just sat in the sauna. You know, it was more like a Jewish workout. That's it.
Elaine, the guy's Jewish 2 days. He's already making Jewish jokes.
Which reminds me, did you hear the one about the rabbi and the farmer's daughter? Huh?
Of course, Jews tell all kinds of jokes, and eventually Jews became such a force in comedy that they created all kinds of jokes. But when I think of Jewish humor, it's the humor of ideas, of sadness, of melding the sadness of life with the humor of life. So there's a joke of like, what's the difference between a Jewish pessimist and a Jewish optimist? A Jewish pessimist thing says, things couldn't be worse. And the optimist says, they could be. Thinking. Now, if you look back and you think, well, where does it come? We are the people of the book. There's the Old Testament, right? And what does it say? And it's not a funny book. I have looked at it carefully, or others actually have looked at it very carefully. I haven't looked at it at all since I left Hebrew school. But it's not a funny book. Not too many jokes. Every time when God laughs, it's with scorn. The kings of the earth stand ready, and rulers combine together against the Lord, and his anointed king, the Lord who sits enthroned, he laughs them to scorn. Honestly, in the Old Testament, if you say to God, stop me if you've heard this one, he does, with a lightning bolt. Here's a little something from the Testament. This is Elisha. He went up from there to Bethel, and as he was on his way, some small boys came out of the city and jeered at him, saying, "Get along with you, bald head, get along." He turned round and looked at them, and he cursed them in the name of the Lord. And 2 she-bears came out of the wood and mauled 42 of them. That's humor for you. Now, one of the interesting things about Judaism to me is that it's a questioning religion. We know God is up there, he's number one, Yahweh, all of that, but still, we're skeptics. So even Job, when he's going through all of these things, all of this surus and the boils and the children dying and every bad thing happening, finally he says, make me know my transgression and sin. Why dost thou hide thy face and count me as thy enemy? And this is the Lord's response. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Who determined this measurement? Surely you know. On what basis were it sung? Anyway, that's a little bit over the top. I mean, Job is asking him why. And if I was Job, happy I'm not, I would have said, impressive, but this is sort of a non sequitur, don't you think? I asked, why me? And then you went on like Trump, saying how great you are. We understand you're God. Here's a cartoon from the book by Ben Schwartz about Job, prank. At first I was teaching Job a lesson, but now I'm just messing with him. Here's a cartoon of mine from the New Yorker. Act of God, no problem, we sue God. So even this attitude of skepticism is part of Judaism and part of humor, because humor is constantly questioning. You know, even amid the pandemic, I still question. Honestly, right from the very beginning, because I saw things in a humorous way, when they said, don't use any masks because they're ineffective, and we have to save these ineffective masks for the healthcare workers who really need them. Okay, think about it. We got to save the ineffective. So right there, you knew something was wrong. It's a great thing by that well-known rabbi, Robert Frost, Forgive me, O Lord, my little jokes on thee, and I'll forgive thy great big one on me. That's sort of, I feel is, honestly, I feel if you get to the pearly gates, I don't know if Jews have, I don't think we have pearly gates. Maybe we have fake pearly gates. I'm not sure. But I think if you get there and all of a sudden you're not let in because God was offended by a joke, then I'd be more interested to see if Satan had a sense of humor. So looking at all this, where does it come from? It doesn't come from the Bible. When you get to the Talmud, now you got real Jewishness. You got questions upon questions and answers. And so here's a cartoon from the New Yorker by Tom Toro, not Jewish, about the 10 Commandments. Actually, is there a section at the bottom for comments? So with the Talmud, there definitely is. So here are these yeshiva bookers from 1905. Now look at all of them. Now look at the guy on the right. Doesn't the guy way on the right, my right, look like Marty Feldman? Okay. So these are the kinds of Talmudic questions that they turn themselves in knots in. If a bird is found within 50 feet of a man's property, it belongs to him. However, if it is found outside those limits, it belongs to the person who finds it. But here's Marty Feldman over there saying, but what happens if one of the bird's feet is within the limit and one of the feet is without it? Well, you know, that's 95% away to a joke. That's so ludicrous. But now we'll actually, in comic graphic form, give you a sort of a Talmudic kind of joke, one of these deep philosophical jokes. So the guy, and very many versions of this joke. Often this is a Jewish guy who's been to Cambridge and Oxford, and he knows all about Aristotle and Plato and Kant, but he wants to just finish up his learning. And so he goes to the rabbi. And he says, Rabbi, explain the Talmud to me. And the rabbi says, very well, first I will ask you a question. If two men climb up a chimney and one comes out dirty and one comes out clean, which one washes himself? The dirty one. No. They look at each other. The dirty man thinks he's clean and the clean man thinks he's dirty. Therefore, the clean man washes himself. Now another question. If two men climb up a chimney and one comes out dirty and one comes out clean, which one washes himself? You just told me, Rabbi, the man who is clean washes himself because he thinks he's dirty. No, they each look at themselves. The clean man knows he doesn't have to wash himself. So the dirty man washes himself. Now, one more question. If two men climb up a chimney and one climbs out dirty and one climbs out clean, which one washes himself? I don't know, Rabbi, depending on your point of view, it could be either one. No, if two men climb up a chimney, how could one remain clean? They're both dirty and they both wash themselves. Rabbi, you asked me the same question 3 times. You gave me 3 different answers. Is this some kind of joke? This isn't a joke, my son. This is the Talmud. So this kind of reasoning, crazy, logical, illogical reasoning, in this instance, what the rabbi is telling by this joke is no matter how logical you get, there's a reality. There's a reality that makes mockery of all of our logic and all of our reasoning, which doesn't mean we give it up, but we understand the humility of it. So I see this sort of as a deeply Jewish joke. Here's another one. Man looks up to God and he said, God, to what? To you, what is 1,000,000 years? And God says, a second. And he says, and God, to you, what is $1,000,000? And God says, a penny. And the guy says, can I have a penny? He says, sure, wait a second. Now, when we come a little bit more recently, interesting book. I had a truncated career in psychology. Sigmund Freud and his jokes and their relation to the unconscious, you know, it was about aggression and sexuality and all of that. But in jokes, he thought that we expressed our hidden impulses. And all the jokes in the book, and this date from, the book comes out in 1905, are really Jewish jokes. And the Jewish jokes of a particular period in the 19th century. And they're very dated, but they're still great jokes. Hey, Joan Christen, you disappeared. Please. All right, that's all right. I lost Joan. I don't know. Maybe she's an anti-Semite. I doubt it. After all, she's here. Anyway, here are these great jokes. So the jokes, even though they're dated, they're perfect jokes. And that means by 1905, Jews know how to make the perfect joke. So the matchmaker brings the bridegroom to the bride, and he says, here she is, and the bridegroom comes over and he whispers and says, what have you brought me? She's blind in one eye, she's lame, and she's got a hunchback. And the matchmaker says, you don't have to whisper, she's deaf too. So there, this thing where logic double backs on itself doesn't make, same thing with the Schnorrer jokes. You know, look, you're all Jews, you understand probably. A Schnorrer is like a beggar, but he's not like a beggar, he's an entitled beggar. Because in Judaism, we owe charity, we have to. So then the Schnorrer goes to the patron and he says, I'm not feeling that well. And he says, all right, I'll give you some money, go to a spa. And so the rich man then goes to his own spa, the finest spa in Vienna, and he sees the Schnorrer has spent all the money there. And he says to the Schnorrer, what are you doing? I gave you the money, you went to the best spa in Vienna. And the Schnorrer says, look, when it comes to my health, money is no object. So Freud. But, oh, that's nice. Let's move a little further to my own background in history, where grew up in Queens, born in 44, went to the Catskills, all the resorts with all the Jewish comedians, all of them. Alan King, Jackie Mason, Buddy, all who changed their names, Roddy Nance, Jerry Lewis especially, because he went to Brown, we went to Brown. So I don't know, that's my dad there, Molly, and there's me. And I always thought I looked a little like Jerry Lewis. And my very first, very sophisticated comedy was making faces like Jerry Lewis. Lady, you know, not New Yorker kind of humor. But the important thing for me was understanding, which I understood before, that being Jewish was partly, in some sense, being funny. Everybody had uncles or relatives, there were people who were funny. And that was part of who you were. It was part of growing up on the block in Queens on 169th Street, being able to ridicule, to taunt, to rant, not the most sophisticated kinds of humor, but certainly a kind of wit honing. Trump never really got beyond that. I just wrote a blog about Trump and his. The fact is, he's funny in that kind of way. Anyway, I would grow up seeing these great comedians like Rodney Dangerfield.
I'll tell you, I'm all right now, but last week I was in rough shape, you know? Now, last week I told my wife I need a home improvement loan. She gave me $1,000 to move out. I'll tell you, my wife, there's always something, you know? Well, the other day I called her up. I said to her, honey, I've been thinking about the last time we had sex. I'm getting excited. She said, who is this? I tell you, my wife, she never went for me. Well, the first time I called her up, she told me, come on over, there's nobody home. So I went over, there was nobody home.
I see that as like, a direct, kind of lineage. And here, like jokes by Henny Youngman, pushing 50 isn't the problem, it's pulling 49. Look, children are just pathetic substitutes for people who can't have pets. I'm a citizen of the world, but I'm based in my own. I don't know what I'd do without it, but I'd like to find out. Anyway, those jokes are not by Henny Youngman. I just set you up. Those are all my cartoons that appeared in the New Yorker, every one of them. What I'm trying to get across here is this tradition, which I imbibed. This is, look, children are just pathetic substitutes. I don't know what I do without it. I'd like to find out. What I'm trying to get here is that even though I didn't really know it growing up, I was the inheritor of this tradition, of these rhythms, this language. You know, so even now, let's say if I'm thinking of jokes or about what's happening, right? I think in a certain rhythm. I think, okay, the only people who are really happy about what's happening now are people who are actually under house arrest. Now we're all in the same boat. The other line I sort of had was, we're going through an epic historic moment, but I liked history when it was something in the past. So people ask me, how do you come up with ideas? And I say, well, I think of them. Now, and the ideas I like to think of, they actually have an idea. There's usually some sort of reference. I showed this to cartoon to students and they sort of thought it was funny, but they didn't understand that was Rodin actually did both these sculptures. So how did I think? How did I become a cartoonist? How did I avoid being what my parents would have liked me to be, an accountant, a dentist, or a lawyer? Well, I went to the High School of Music and Art, which from 1958 to 1962, and that was on 135th Street and Convent Avenue in Manhattan. And I had to take a bus and 3 subway trains back and forth every day. So from 58 to 62. So that's a completely different era. Just imagine it. Imagine how their parents could not tolerate that now, right? I'm going into Manhattan. I'm playing, I play basketball, coming back at 8, 9 o'clock every day to do that. It was a cool school, very cool, music and art. Now they've renamed it LaGuardia High School because they think that's a catchier name. So I went for art. And there I am, Robert Mankoff. That's 1962. That's me. And that's nice also because all those pictures at that time, if they're Jewish, they gave you nose jobs. You know what I mean? All of a sudden, there was like that white out thing there. He gave you nose jobs. So I look at, hey, but look at this dude. Look at Edward Barak. He's got a pipe. He's got a pipe. It's 1962. He's got a pipe. Anyway, I wondered what happened to Edward Barak. And because of the miracle of the internet, I could find out. He became the Dean of American Pipe Makers. Is that great? Man, think what I could have accomplished if only if I had smoked a pipe. But no, there I was with this photographic nose job in 1962. Actually, I pasted that. Anyway, I went from music and art to Syracuse University, where I majored in hair, which I still have. This is my own. I can swim in it because it's my own. And people look at that picture of me from 1966 and they think, did you do drugs? I can see you people questioning me. And all I can say is not enough. If I had a time machine, I would go back and I would do not that much more, but more than I did. Okay, here's me in 1974. I've just left my graduate program in psychology at City University, unceremoniously, without my PhD. I was on the cusp of my PhD, but it was the world's longest cusp. It went on and on and on. So naturally, I decided to be a cartoonist. I had always wanted to be a cartoonist, but then at age 30, in 1974, I decided that was it. I was going to go for it. And I got a lot of rejections from the New Yorker, a lot of rejections, rejection. But eventually, this rejection notice changed to this. Now, that's not the case, of course. The New Yorker does not stoop to that kind of vulgar humor, but every once in a while, as long as you don't hurt your back, stooping is perfectly okay. So this is probably my best known cartoon, No Thursdays Out. How about Never Is Good for You? This is the cartoon that put my daughter through college. So really the way it worked, especially after I started the Cartoon Bank, which is now Cartoon Collections, is at that time, 1993, the New Yorker paid you $1,000 for that cartoon, which was really the highest price anyone paid for any cartoon. But through reprints and textbooks and whatnot, a million different things, like I said, put my daughter through college. And if you want to put my daughter through graduate school, you can go and buy more of them on, as well as other cartoons on Cartoon Collection. Okay, but also that cartoon got me into the Yale Book of Quotations. There I am. See that? Robert Mankoff, U.S. cartoonist, 1944. Next to that, other famous humorist, Mao Zedong. So when in 2014, when my book came out, which was How About Never Is Ever Good for You, My Life in Cartoons, I made up, and I was 70. I'll be 76 on Friday. You really all, this is free. You really all should send me presents, honestly. Susan, just give them my email and address. So here are the 3 jokes I made up once I turned 70. And one was, I'm 70. The good news is it could be worse. The bad news is it will be. I'm 70. The good news is 70 is the new 50. The bad news is dead is not the new alive. And the final one was, I'm 70, and when you're 70 and you're a guy and you wake up, you're stiff everywhere but where you want to be. So here are some of my cartoons for your enjoyment, delectation, and amusement. Hamlet's Duplex. Now that's product placement. I'm sorry, dear, I wasn't listening. Could you repeat what you said since we've been married? Your coverage doesn't seem to include illness. On the one hand, eliminating the middleman would result in lower costs, increased sales, and greater consumer satisfaction. On the other hand, we're the middleman. This is philosophical. There is no justice in the world. There is some justice in the world. The world is just. This is called What Lemmings Believe, which I guess I didn't have to say that, and that you can see it. And in my cartoons, I like there to be an idea, but the idea isn't like straightforward like an editorial cartoon. Not straightforward. There's an ambiguity, is it? What is this cartoon actually about? I will be questioning the audience on this, and I want some really good interpretations. Well, to me, it's obviously about belief. It's not about lemmings, and it's about motivated cognition. I thought I'd try to pretend to be smart. We believe what we want to believe. And that How About Never Is Never Good for You is a book. It was an instant bestseller, which means it was actually a bestseller for an instant. You need it to be a bestseller for longer, actually never make back the advance. And in it, I have a chapter called I'm Not Arguing, I'm Jewish, which is actually a joke I came up with when I was courting my last, third, and best wife, Corey Scott Whittier, who is not Jewish. And I thought I was just having a normal discussion. And she said, "Why are you arguing?" I say, "I'm not arguing, I'm Jewish." Anyway, I have learned over the years, and we're the first 2 training marriages, and now it's very good. I don't argue anymore. There's a great cartoon, New Yorker cartoon, I think it's by Pat Burns, where it has a guy in a kitchen, and the thing I love the cartoon is just how concise it is and how the joke is made with a single word at the end. And he's saying to his wife, "What else can I do for you wrong?" Perfect cartoon. Here's a cartoon of mine, the only Jewish cartoon I have published, and and remember, if you need anything, I'm available 24/6. Now, I was bar mitzvahed at the Hotel Pierre, no less, in 1957. Had no idea really what I was reading. In this little balloon, I say, maybe if I had payas, I would know what this means. Not helping, too Jewish anyway. And that's how I grew up. I definitely grew up in an environment which we still see some of these tensions. I know that when I grew up, it was a block of all Jewish people. There were Italians on the block next to us and Irish on the block next to us. The Italian, we're sort of friendly with the Irish, and the Italians would beat us up, which wasn't like a bad beating up by the Italians. It was just like they were training to beat up tougher people. Here's an interesting New Yorker cartoon about that, in a way, about assimilation. It's a New Yorker cartoon from 1929. Now, it's interesting. In 1880, there are 80,000 Jews in New York, and by 1920, there are over 1 million. And this is already first generation, second generation. And see, the joke here is in memory of our beloved father, Isidore Cohen, and they've all changed their name, Benson Cowan, Cameron Kane, and so on. Now, interestingly, along those lines, William Shawn, who was the editor of the New Yorker and the ultimate waspy guy, was actually Jewish. But he was more than an assimilated Jew. It was like he was a hidden Jew. So everything was, when he talked, he didn't move his hands, he didn't move his eyes. I don't even think he moved his mouth. Somehow it got through to you. And so he was a son of Benjamin Shawn. So once he died and I became editor, I started having some there were no cartoons about Jews when William Shawn was in the magazine, basically. But I felt we could get a little looser. So I have a cartoon like this that appeared under my editorship. What don't you understand? When my clients fly their guests over your farm on the way to Vegas, they'd like to see Mazel Tov, Josh, spelled out on your cornfield. Now, Jews are so sensitive that then you get all these offended emails saying it's about stereotypes and plays into Jews being pushy or whatnot. I think you can really only honestly and genuinely be annoyed and dislike with the groups you're a member of. Because people are annoying, especially people Here's another one. Bank's closed today, folks. It's Yom Kippur. Anyway, once they have put this book out, Have I Got a Cartoon for You? No longer did I have to worry in any way about having cartoons that were too Jewish, because this is the moment book of Jewish cartoons, including that cartoon. I'll show you some of them. Too Jewish? And interesting, David Cypress did this cartoon, and David's not my age. He's somewhat younger. He's probably 70. But growing up, this idea of too Jewish was definitely part of your consciousness. Eve's mom, Adam seems like a very nice young man. Tell me, where did he go to school? Why don't you put on a sweater? You sound like you're coming down with something. Look, darling, if you keep listening to that snake, don't come running to me. Must I sacrifice family for a career? This is a great cartoon. It doesn't seem like a Jewish cartoon, but it is, right? I had that, only worse. My cartoon, any other hobbies besides suffering? This is great. I'm not beached, I just don't swim on Saturdays. We got you a dreidel. Yeah, holidays are always a little disappointing. Go away, we're still Jewish. Fetch dirty to me, honey. He's all right, I just wish he were a little more pro-Israel. Boat christening, boat bris. I hope you're here for the circumcision. I still want grandchildren. And this is the last cartoon in the book, done by Lars Kenseth, who is not Jewish. but knows how to make a Jewish joke. It killed him to call. Anyway, you can get all of these cartoons on Cartoon Collections, my website, which has not just Jewish cartoons, but over 500,000 cartoons on every conceivable topic. And let's see, I think that's it. I think I stopped sharing. And now I see the lovely audience. And what do I do?
Excellent.
What do I do, Susan?
Thank you so much for that very funny presentation. We will now take some questions. You can type them in the chat box at the bottom. But somebody did ask at the very beginning, what percentage of Jewish comedians are actually depressed, do you think?
34.8. What's happening?
Go ahead, keep going.
Okay.
You should see the chat.
Okay. So I think comedians in general, there's a couple of things. One is that when comedians are depressed or commit suicide, it's more ironic, right? So it's more noticeable. But I think especially if you're a stand-up comedian, the showbiz life, or even just trying to be funny to make money is actually depressing. So it's hard to say, it's hard to distinguish. I mean, I taught a course in the psychology of humor, so you could go, it's an interesting question that people have looked at, like how much of the truth is that you do often find a lot of depression in comedians is due to the actual lifestyle of being a comedian and the demands of being funny, and how much of it is, you know, what I would say is probably there's a portion of people who are funny who are using funny as a defense mechanism against depression and against anxiety, and those people are maybe more likely to have mood swings. I mean, to some extent, I think I'm sort of like that, although I'm in no way clinically depressed. I find that humor is an antidepressant for me, that things often are dull, and that by seeing things through a humorous lens, it lifts my mood.
Great. So for people who want to take a try at writing a caption for our current cartoon caption contest, what suggestions would you give them? Where should they start? What's the process?
I think the process is try to think of the very worst captions that you can think of. Generate as many bad captions, because bad ideas are the way to good ideas. And don't look at if you look at the picture and you get some great idea, you know, if you get some great idea right away, of course, sometimes that happens. But in that picture, which looked like it was a mob guy ready to push maybe this other guy off the roof, and you're looking at God, well, then the first thing I would do is just free associate to it. Free associate to it. You know, my first free associate everything. First of all, look at everything in the picture. Look at every single thing in the picture. And then, as I said, just write any sentence at all. Like, you know, write a bad sentence. I'm going to push him off. Are you going to make him fly? And then that might lead to you to thinking of the word fly, because he's not. I mean, that's like an old mob thing. Is that he could sing, you know, he could rat it out, but he couldn't fly when they pushed the guys off the thing. So maybe he's going to get his wings. But you have to do a lot of free association rather than just. You can't look at it like an SAT question. You know, like, let me just keep staring at this. And so I would write down, you know, various different things in associations. I mean, that's what I do. And once I would write down one thing, I would try to write down as many as I could, in that in general, quality comes out of quantity. Now, those aren't genuine suggestions. Those are just to throw you off. If you want the real suggestions, you have to go to my special caption hotline. Okay.
Great, thank you. Are New Yorker cartoons as funny as they used to be?
No, and they never were. No, they're not as funny because they kicked me out because they needed new blood, even though the blood was stale. They needed, look, the New Yorker had a problem, which was a political problem, in that the people there were too many white, older men. And as this came across, and I mean, a good intention that we want more women cartoonists, which were fine. I brought in a lot of women cartoonists, but it was more urgent that you could show that half the cartoonists were women, whether or not they had really come up, you know, the way I did with all the rejection and learned it. So they're probably not as funny as they were, certainly for my demographic and even younger. And actually, they're not as funny. The jokes just aren't as good, except for the people who are still doing them, who I brought in, which is a very self-serving answer. But honestly, if you're not going to serve yourself, really, especially now, where you've got to do all takeout.
When you were at the New Yorker, how hard was it to win the contest?
Quite hard, in that there were 5,000 to 10,000 entries. But eventually I worked out with computer people an algorithm that let everybody vote on it. So then it became easy to judge, but still very hard to win. And that many winning captions are similar to captions that don't win. So a friend of mine, Lawrence Wood, won the caption contest 7 times, which is very hard, but he hasn't won it in 4 years. So it's difficult to win.
Well, I would say people should try the Moment caption contest. It's slightly easier to win that one.
Right, you do that.
Is there a difference in humor between the genders?
Of course, which doesn't mean there's huge amount of overlap. You know what I mean? But even if you thought that there were no biological differences in any way, you thought that people were exactly the same, which they don't seem to be, but you thought they were exactly the same, just the fact that the culture treats men and women differently would lead to different perspectives, you know? So it's different to be, for the most part, to be a woman than a man. And therefore, what I would say, but although there's huge overlap, what I would say is that much of women's cartooning or humor is more autobiographical, telling you, well, let's put it this way. When Henny Youngman did jokes, you didn't know anything about Henny Youngman. There's zero you know about Henny Youngman. When Amy Schumer does jokes, you know a lot about Amy Schumer. On the other hand, you also know a lot about Louis C.K., too much. So there's overlap, and I think the autobiographical kind of humor that I think was a mainstay of women's humor more is seeped over to be I think men are being more influenced by women's humor than women being influenced by men's humor, by essentially what I call joke humor, or almost like joke kinds of math. So even though Rodney Dangerfield is a persona, you don't know anything about Rodney Dangerfield. You don't know anything about him. Anything he said about him and his wife had nothing to do with anything. But in Roz Chast cartoons, you actually know a lot about what Roz thinks and feels. So I actually think the different kinds of humor are complementary, and I'm eclectic when it comes to that. I don't see one kind of humor as superior to another. And when people ask me, well, what is your favorite cartoon? I say, well, that's weird. I've seen millions of cartoons. If I had a number 1, that would mean I'd also have a number 2. And then I'd have 3. And then all of a sudden I'm having to decide what the 1,468th favorite cartoon of mine is. And honestly, I got other things to do.
The next question is similar. Are men brought up to be funnier than women?
Yes. They're not brought up to be funnier, but they are given the ability to be bad, to say bad things, to interrupt, to not have to be good all the time. Whereas girls, certainly when I was growing up, is, you know, it's a good girl. And that there was lots of kinds of bad girls, right? and there was a prejudice against women in humor, but also women. Look, part of humor is transgressive or vulgar or whatever, and men were allowed to do that. But also just the ability to shoot your mouth off, to interrupt somebody, to feel the to feel that you had that, and that's how I always felt. See, I was never cowed by hierarchy. So if I was in a situation where someone was my boss, I always felt like, yeah, well, if I have a good line, I'm going to say it. So I don't think women are. I don't know that most men are brought out that way, but much more. So you get my point. Definitely different.
Thank you. In terms of the writing process, what comes first? Do you need to have an illustration and then you get the caption, or do you come up with captions and then seek out the illustration?
Both. All people do it differently. Some people are sort of like doodlers, and they're almost running their own caption contest, where they're doodling. They've got some idea in mind, but they're doodling and drawing, and then it evolves, and then they see an idea. And in other instances, the people are more writers, you know, and some jokes lead themselves to that. It's more like you see lines, and sometimes a cartoon will start off one way where you'll know, maybe this is, you know, half a year ago or more, where you'll hear a term like woke, you know, like woke meaning progressive. And something about it sort of bothers you, and you know there's a joke there in being woke. And then you'll think, well, what is it? Is it an alarm clock? Is it like a very liberal alarm clock, which like goes off and talks about the patriarchy? And is it, you know, this is your woke up call? So it's more verbal. I think the joke I ended up coming out with was something like a store with, it said, toxic masculinity detox center. And there was a sign saying, woke-ins welcome, rather than walk-ins. So it happens in a lot of different, it happens in a lot of different ways. I mean, some things will, like with the coronavirus, I mean, every time you say coronavirus, you cough. That's it. You know, I don't want to do a cough. You're scared of coughing. With the coronavirus, originally it was so obvious that there would be the first jokes that would have to do with masks. It would just be obvious. And those jokes very quickly would become old. So it would be very important that you got those jokes out first. You know, whether it was a guy holding up a bank with one of those masks, you know, something like that. But you also knew from your past experience that many people would be getting those ideas at the same time. So you'd have to do them very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm. Great. And we're going to take the last question is, who is your favorite old-time comedian and who is your favorite modern comedian?
Oh. Well, my favorite, I guess my favorite comedian, so here's two bad answers really, because they involve Woody Allen and Louis C.K. So Woody Allen was a huge influence on me. Pleasant because of the verbal humor, his writing, everything, just the rhythm of the jokes. I very much did like Louis C.K. and still, I actually view Louis C.K. as a moralist who's sort of twisted. But now, of course, I can't look at the jokes through the same kind of lens. Right now, there's a very pleasant young comedian, John Mulvaney, I like, you know, yeah, so now it turns out to be all guys. So when we record it, you'll put in we'll record it that I like another woman.
Well, thank you very much for today's very enjoyable session. Thank you for teaching us how to write captions. A very, very happy birthday at the end of the week from all of us at Moment, and I'm sure everybody here on the screen. And please, everybody, thank you for joining us today. And remember to go to the Moment website and check out the cartoon caption contest, enter your own, vote on what you'd like, buy a book.
Go to cartooncollections.com.
Go to cartooncollections.com. And please sign up for our future Zoominars starting with next week. Thank you very much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.